we're fortunate to have Cirina Catania here today. OWC had a slot, and but let's face it, storage isn't too sexy, and they thought it might behoove them to instead have one of their power users tell some of the stories about her adventures in the wild. And with the idea that we all need to be reminded about storage. It might not be sexy, but it's vitally important. And I think
Cirina is sexy.
Cirina,
thank you.
Cirina will have some stories of some things that maybe didn't go so smoothly with storage, and what she's done to correct it with her workflows and all. So Cirina, let me tell them just a little bit more about you. You're a filmmaker and an author and a trainer and co-founder of the Sundance Film Festival. I didn't know that, even though I've known you for years. A filmmaker, of course, documentary filmmaker, producer, screenwriter. She wears many hats, and today she's going to tell us about the life as a road warrior, managing media, prep, and production, and post.
Well, do you want to talk about the big mistake that happened about a year ago, or do you want to start with the documentary?
Well, I know that you're a great storyteller, and I've heard this story before. Tell us about the catastrophe.
Well, it was right before NAB in April of last year, and I dropped a friend off at the airport. I had at the time, this is one of those do as I say, not as I do stories. I teach this, and yet at that moment I had over 100 terabytes daisy-chained because I was preparing for a new system that would be a 250 terabyte system, so I could start organizing the media for all my projects. So everything was daisy-chained, it was all connected, and I was managing the media beautifully. I had everything all organized. So I took everything offline, went to the airport, and when I got back, I turned to my computer, but I put my computer out of sleep. I had dozens of little yellow icons, and Maxim and Kirian and Martin, you guys know, Mike, you guys know about this. I panicked because it all said 0 bytes. So there was nothing left. And the reason this is important, and we all know that you're supposed to have 2 copies in your office and 1 copy's offsite, right? That's sort of the typical, the threefer, right? Well, I had everything in my office because of the organization. And it took us over a year. It turns out that at 6:19 in the morning, I had an internal server system run by Western Digital, and at a root level, which you cannot see, you cannot detect, you cannot erase, it issued a command to erase everything that was attached. And it didn't just erase it, because it would take a long time to erase 100 terabytes efficiently, right? It rewrote the address track at the beginning and the end of every RAID, so that what was left was a mess. And I'm crying, which I don't do very often, but I was literally in tears. And I called Andy Markin at OWC because they're one of my sponsors. And I said, I don't know what to do. And I called Maxim because he knows a lot. And I just started calling all of my friends, and nobody could figure out what was going on. So we sent the drives, all of them, not all of them, because I had some very private, confidential client information on some of those drives. So some of those had never even been fixed. But the ones that could be fixed, we sent to OWC. They spent a couple of months looking through it, and they couldn't return everything, so they sent it to Drive Savers. And the reason I'm here today is because my company and the films that I was working on would have died had it not been for OWC and some of the other companies that pitched in to help. It cost me so much personally. I figure about $70,000 of my own money, but thanks to OWC, Drive Savers, and Blackmagic, and some of the other companies that wanted to help me, they provided additional RAIDs, and it's taken me many, many months, because what did come back were millions of files with no metadata. And this is another reason why I'm such a big fan of Philip and Greg, because metadata is so important. We had no file names, no file structure, no folder structure, no dates of creation. So I couldn't even say, okay, I know I did this interview in October of 2015, let's find all the files from 2015, and you couldn't find them. There is a new application called FinderCAT, which I have not yet used, that Philip and Greg have developed, which those of you, even in an enterprise level, you can log your metadata, and Philip, excuse me if I'm not explaining this right, because I haven't tried it yet. Had I had FinderCAT and had the metadata been baked into those files, despite the tragedy that happened, some of that metadata would have migrated with those files once I recovered them. But it's been months, and I'm still opening files. It's like Christmas every time I open a file that will open, and what is it, and where does it go? So I'm still putting things back. I had a 10-year project that's an investigative project that is ready to go to pitch to TV series, and a couple companies interested in it, and I have to find everything. I have another project that is a short form. It's a 40-minute piece, and we found most of the media for that. And thank God, the Wounded Warrior that I'm doing the film about, it's a feature-length documentary about Keontae's story, Kiontestory. We found probably about 70% of that media, and we've done some reshoots to try to catch up. There's one thing that this group will find interesting that I learned through the process. A lot of the QuickTime files, the wrappers were destroyed, so I can't open the QuickTime files. It's really surprising to me, though, that we were using Blackmagic cameras most of this shoot for Keontae because they're sponsoring me. So we had everything from the pocket camera to the original cinema camera to 2.5K to the cinema 4K, and all of those files came back. All of those QuickTime files from the Blackmagic cameras came back. And I asked Grant at NAB why that was, and he said because we have a proprietary wrapper that we have designed. The other files that were problems were how many people say .wav and how many people say wave? I say wave. The wave files, a lot of those were corrupted. So you'll get partway through the file and then all you'll hear is shh. So I had to keep every iteration of every file that came back because I'm mixing and matching parts of the media. So if there's an audio interview that's an hour long, 20 minutes into it, it'll be corrupted on one media clip and maybe not on another. And so be careful of the WAV files, be careful of the .mov files. The other thing that I lost were over 900 Final Cut events. Gone. I can't reconnect anything because it doesn't know where to find the files. So all of the work that we had done up to that point, that was gone. What else? Oh, our lovely system where we archive the camera media, none of the archive files came back. What did come back were the admin files, the Excel files, some of the still photography, some of the raw still photography was didn't come back, but a lot of the JPEGs did. And the reason I'm telling you this is that since this happened to me, what I've started to do is completely isolate the admin files that I know would be protected on catastrophe and making extra copies of the project files and the media files that I know are a little bit more delicate. I've also started, and I used to do this all the time anyway, but you know, when you're running a marketing division of the studio, I had $200 million a year budget. So I could do whatever I want. Now that I'm doing independent films, I don't have the budget for a lot of hardware. But I'm organizing admin in one. Financial is all completely separate, and I don't access that at all, just for security reasons, unless I really need it, unless I'm really working with those files. So the financial files are completely separate. Music is separate. Graphics and pictures are on several drives, they're separate. And then I've started keeping raw media files and raw audio files also separate. And then what I will do is I will build a system where on some of the drives I have what I call my project folders, so that I pull pieces of whatever I need for that project into those folders, and I make duplicate copies of that. So that gives me some redundancy that hopefully will help me in the future. And I know we always say we need the 3 copies, and a lot of us just don't do it. So I'm encouraging everybody to do it.
It's not something you should ever skimp on. And I will also say I'm a big fan of OWC, and I use their soft grade product.
Right.
And it'll tell you if a drive's going to fail. I haven't gotten one of these emails, but if any of those drives start to show any performance issues, it sends you an email so you know before it fails, and you can take appropriate steps.
Exactly. I love OWC products, and I'm not just saying that because they brought me up here. I'm up here because they really did save my life. And I can tell you, this morning I looked on my desk and I had 8 2.5-inch SSD drives that I use internally for the cameras. 4 of them are OWC and 4 of them are another manufacturer. And I don't want to diss anybody else. But all 4 of the OWC 2.5-inch drives, the 1 terabyte drives that I was using back with the original cinema cameras, they're all working just fine. 3 out of 4. I promise you, 3 out of 4 of the other 2.5-inch drives have been marked for failure by SoftRate. So that's really scary. One other hint I wanted to say to you, and this is something that I found, a lot of you manage a lot of media, and I'm obviously managing a lot of media that needs organization. There's a little program, I use Shop It Pro. How many of you use Shop It Pro? But I use a little program now called Hedge, Hedge. Love that thing. Left side, you put all your source material. Right side, you put wherever you want it to go, and you can make simultaneous checksum copies, and it just zips right through it. So I can take, if you're doing a shoot with a lot of cards, you just shove the cards in, and it just makes multiple copies all at once, and it's pretty awesome. And then you can organize that very quickly.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing
my mistakes.
Your experience, yes. It's valuable. You might save somebody else from going through it.
I hope so.
Appreciate it. Thanks. And thanks to OWC. They provided the food, helped pay for the venue. We appreciate it very much.